I have had a really exciting week photographically, which is a bit of a strange thing to say because I actually haven't really been out with my camera, and I certainly haven't been doing any landscape photography. In fact, this week I've spent the majority of my time at home, but what I have been doing is going out into my garden and re-delving into the world of macro photography. Now, during lockdown, macro was something that I got very much into, and I said when lockdown was starting to come to an end, I'd go out to some local woodlands and locations to do macro in different places. And I have done this over the last few weeks. In fact, I've been to 4 very small local woodlands, very close to my house, but although I found the experience exciting and rewarding, and in many ways very challenging to find things to photograph and bits of interest, I have come home with a few images I've been happy with, such as these spider photographs here, and this interesting fly bug that I managed to find here. Now, there's no denying that I really like those images, and they were incredibly exciting to find and spend time photographing. But it's been the things that I found in my garden that I have really enjoyed shooting. And during lockdown I was asked by the filter company Nisi if I wanted to become an ambassador. And as I've used their filters for a year now and I absolutely love them, I of course said yes. As a result, they sent me this beautiful macro lens to put on the end of my camera, which means that I can now do macro with my Z6, which is super exciting. So that's exactly what I've been doing this week in my garden, and I thought it would be nice to sit down and talk you through the images I've been taking, because some of them have been so eye-opening and beautiful, and the experience of just being in my garden and connecting with the wildlife that fly in and out and come in and out of my garden throughout the week has been a really eye-opening and awakening experience, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most has been really connecting with the bugs and insects that come into my garden, and I'm going to start off this image roundup with this guy here. Everybody meet Simon. Now, the moment I went out of my sunroom, I was greeted with Simon. He was sitting on my decking just minding his own business, and I then spent the next 20 minutes photographing this guy. And what I like about this collection of images is that it tells a story. So we began when I first came out of my house. Simon was obviously a bit wary of me and he hid in his shell. But what I like about this image is that you can just see him underneath the shell, hiding from me. And as we move through the images, you can see he started to feel comfortable. He started to come out of his shell, no pun intended there. And then he basically became quite comfortable with me being there. And slowly he began to come out, he began to move around and interact with my decking once more. Now, the great thing about photographing snails, for instance, is that they can't fly away from you, so you can literally spend loads of time just sitting with them, photographing them and just enjoying their company, which might sound like a bit of a strange thing to say, but until I started doing macro this week, I had a bit of a negative feeling towards snails. And that is because last year I spent a lot of time growing flowers from seed, and during last summer I had an influx of snails and slugs in my garden, which ended up killing pretty much all of the flowers that I had spent months cultivating. But this year, being able to spend time in the garden with them, photographing them, has allowed me to develop a new love for them. And spending time with Simon was a great way to reconnect with this bug and just get a sort of insight into their world. A few days later it was really sunny, and again I walked out of my sunroom, and right on the doormat was this ladybird here. Now again, this ladybird was quite timid, but I spent a good 15 minutes with it as it was scurrying along my mat, hiding underneath it in the shade, and basically just going about its business. Now, because I was able to sit with it and take my time with it, you begin to build up some trust with it, and it starts to come out and just interact with things as it normally would. And And I think what I like about these images is that it showcases nature interacting with parts of the garden which are man-made, parts of the garden that we've put there for our own benefit. For instance, this mat that obviously we wipe our feet on before we come into the house. But these bugs are also interacting with these human man-made objects, and the great thing about photographing in your garden is that you can get these bugs and insects on these man-made objects and show how they are coming into your world and interacting with it, which is actually a really fun and exciting thing to do. Now, after about 15 minutes, this guy flew away, and sadly I never saw him again, but I was very grateful for those 15 minutes that I was able to spend with him. Now, rainy days have been my favourite time to be in the garden, and during this past week we've had a good mix of sunshine and showers, quite a lot of mist and fog and atmosphere, and especially morning dew on all the plants and leaves within my garden. And I've really enjoyed this because the great thing obviously about macro is that you can zoom in and see these beautiful water droplets on all the plants and flowers within your garden. And especially the greenery is one thing I've really enjoyed shooting, and seeing how these raindrops land on these things and just sort of sit there, creating beautiful patterns, colours, and just adding something that little bit different to the photograph. And of course, a great thing to photograph with water droplets on it is spider webs. And I managed to find so many in my garden that you just aren't aware of on a sunny day, because there isn't those raindrops and that atmosphere in your garden to show them off. But I found so many spider webs in my garden, and some of the less obvious ones that were of interest to me were like the small spider webs in between my decking planks, and just the shapes and that they were creating and interacting with the different plants I just found so interesting, because it's somewhere that you don't normally look and you don't normally photograph, but just the shapes and the patterns that were created with the webs and the rain droplets on them were of real interest to me. And the greatest spider web that I found was actually on my wheelie bin. Again, a man-made object that's there for our own convenience, but nature comes in and does its thing and interacts with it. And I got these really nice photographs here which I really like. Also, having spider webs means there's going to be spiders, and I've spent quite a lot of time this week photographing some really interesting spiders. And again, a man-made object that I've enjoyed finding spiders on is my washing line. And although this isn't your most conventional photograph, I like that idea of nature and humans sort of living in the same place and just getting on with our business. We've got washing lines to dry our clothes outside, but spiders come along, build their webs so they can catch food. In some ways it's not very nice because it's like these man-made objects, and really the spiders should be in trees and bushes creating their webs, but I like that even with these man-made things in the garden, that nature still comes in and still finds its place within the human chaos that we create in our own gardens. And then there's the more unexpected things that you come across, or things that you find in your garden that maybe aren't always there, or that take a little bit of really looking into what's going on in your garden to find. And this strange fly flew into my garden and landed on my tree when it was only there for about 30 seconds, but it was so nice to be able to get this image of it. Even though it wasn't the most prettiest of insects, it was still nice to see it and to photograph it. Then there's little things like some of the plants and that you find that have unusual shapes. If any of you are into astrology, I think this plant shape, or this cut off of a leaf that I've got in my garden, looks a bit like the star sign for Aries. A little bit of a creative mind there, and finding these creative symbols within the garden, but I just find it such a inspirational and rewarding experience. And the more time you spend looking around your garden, the more you become aware of. And the thing is, going out in all weather conditions brings different bugs and insects into your garden, and it really opens your eyes up to what's going on. And I think what I've enjoyed so much about spending this time in my garden with my camera is the fact that my garden, if I'm honest, my back garden anyway, is not the most nature friendly, although that is hopefully going to be changing soon if I find the time to do some of the things I want to do. But despite it not being the most wildlife and nature friendly at the moment, there's still so much in the garden to find and to discover. And I think photographing in your garden and doing macro Because it's your garden, you can just sit there all afternoon and just look around you and wait for the bugs and insects to come to you. And unlike when you're shooting in woodland, you don't feel strange just sitting down waiting for things to come. You know, I find, although I enjoy being in the woodland doing macro, I don't particularly like to sit in one spot, especially if I'm by myself, because people walk past you and give you strange looks. But in your garden, one thing I do is I go out with a book and I sit and read a book, and basically I listen to what's going on, and if I hear things coming in or I spot differences in the weather or changes in the weather, I'll then sit up, get out my camera, walk around and see what else has come in or come out of the garden and open my eyes up to new opportunities. And again, every day you go out there, there's spider webs in new places, there's bugs that you weren't there the day before, and I just find that so exciting. So I just wanted to share that with you today because, as I say, I've not really been out this week doing photography, but I have loved really zooming into my garden and enjoying what is on my doorstep, literally on my doorstep. And although we're getting out of lockdown now and we're allowed out to do photography in some of our more favourite and more normal places again, I still think it's so good to remember that we have so much on our doorstep that I think lockdown has opened our eyes to. And if we're ever in a position again where we're stuck at home, whether it's because of a future lockdown or because of illness or transport issues, whatever it may be, there is so much on our doorstep that we can appreciate and photograph if we just take the time to look and connect with it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video today. It's been something a little bit different, but I will be out doing more macro in the future because I absolutely love it. I think it's always good to get out and try new things, and that's exactly what I've been doing this week, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. As always, I want to say a huge thank you for watching. I hope in some ways this video has inspired you to get out into your own gardens and see what's out there, because there is so much to be discovered, no matter how big or small your garden is. I look forward to hopefully seeing you all again next time. But I found so many spider webs in my garden, and some of the less obvious ones that were of interest to me were like the small spider webs in between my decking plants, in between my decking plaques. What are they called? In between my decking plants. What are they called? Decking planks. In between my decking planks.